Every new console needs to have that landmark first-party game to really lead the way, and for PlayStation VR 2 and Sony's second generation of virtual reality, that game is absolutely Horizon Call of the Mountain. This game doesn't put you in the fur-lined boots of Aloy, though she does briefly show her face in the story, but rather into the body of Riot, a new character with a troubled past as a former Shadow Carja rebel who's given the opportunity to redeem himself and stave off another machine-based threat to the Sundom. From its rather Skyrim-esque opening moment, Call of the Mountain immediately wows on PlayStation VR 2. It starts in a boat ride down a jungle river with a bunch of different machines going about their daily machine-animal lives. The scale is immediately impressive, especially when a tall neck meanders through and over you, and it gives off some real Pokemon Snap vibes, even if you don't have a camera to hand. It also really showcases the dramatic step up in power from PS4 to PS5. The environments look crisp and very well detailed, there's some sumptuous lighting effects and particles floating around, and the game in general stays in lockstep with the graphical finery of the two main entries in this series. It also makes absolute sense for this boat ride to then be modified and turned into a dedicated mode on the main menu, this purely seated showcase that you can happily use for friends and family that want to see what PSVR 2 is like and capable of. But for the main game, it doesn't take long for this boat ride to take a bad turn, and for Riot's adventure to start proper. His shot at redemption comes from being a master of climbing and archery, and the game leans into both of these factors heavily. You will actually spend the majority of your time exploring the levels and clambering up rocky walls and cliff faces, up metal towers and machine carcasses, but combat is sprinkled in alongside this to punctuate the adventure. Climbing is as intuitive as you could want, with clearly marked handholds and yellow ropes wherever you can clamber up the faces of walls. Just reach out, pull a trigger to grab on, and then pull yourself towards the next point that you want to grab onto. Actual rock climbing and bouldering will need a lot of poise, balance and grip, but there's none of that problem here for you to deal with, and you can rapidly scale the environment going hand over hand with ease. Once you add in things like leaping from ledges with a bombastic slow motion effect, using pickaxes for climbing up soft rock faces and ice walls, and rope tethers, there's a fully featured climbing game here in its own right. Between each climb, there's then wandering around flat environments, either using jogging-like hand motions to get around, or the sense controller analog sticks. There's also plenty of interactivity in this world, reaching out to grab containers for looting of crafting parts, eating apples and pears to heal yourself back up, and grabbing certain mission items and various extraneous things like panpipes and tambourines and sticks that you can mess around with. It's fairly straightforward stuff on the whole, and there's not too many physics objects for you to deal with whilst rummaging around, but it gets the job done and it's quite nice and effective, and quite clear what you can loot and what you can't. Of course, this wouldn't be Horizon if you weren't also battling against a menagerie of the sci-fi world's animalistic robots. From the basic Watchers to intimidating sawtooths and flying robot birds and beyond, there's a great selection to battle against with bow and sling, punctuating the adventure here and there. Battles shift away from free motion to arena fights and a different style of movement. You're always attached to the edge of the environment here, strafing with quick one-handed swipes and dodging further with a two-handed swipe. All the while, you'll be facing towards the centre of this space where you've got the robot who will leap around and attack at you, and you can very easily just keep plinging arrows off their robotic armour, using elemental arrows to add status effects, and eventually slingshot bombs as well. It all gets very hectic, especially when there's more than one enemy to face off against, and in the most frantic moments it's actually quite easy to lose some of the kind of clarity to your motions. You can angle your bow a little bit too far and you'll end up in the arrow quick crafting mode. If you fail to reach over your shoulder enough or go too quickly, you might come back without a fresh arrow to fire. When you're manically dodging attacks, it's difficult to spot and get to the various resource plinths around the arena to grab the bonus arrows that they feature, or a quick healing apple if you've taken a few hits. Horizon Call of the Mountain makes this fantastic first impression, but that is one of the areas where there's certain elements that ever so slightly tarnish the experience. The game also pushes hard graphically with stunning vistas as you climb higher and higher in this world, but you can see shadows and details resolving themselves in the periphery a lot of the time. There's also a handful of situations that brought a brief frame rate stutter, which is less than welcome in such an active kind of VR game, though Sony has noted performance improvements as part of a day one patch for this game. It's also sometimes difficult to get the right perspective while climbing. You're always very close to the wall, and the path that it takes you up a cliff face will often wrap around the world and force you to turn around. That is generally fine for standing play, though you might end up with the cable wrapped around your legs, so be careful about that. But it's not great for seated play when you want to be facing generally in a forward direction. While you're climbing, the default motion input for turning doesn't work, but you can set this to the analog stick for turning, which does let you shift your view. You can also reset your view to point forwards by holding the option button, which is standard across all of PSVR 2's games, and there's also an auto turn feature in the accessibility options which tries to frame the climb dynamically for you. This does make some odd choices in places, so it only really felt right when seated and using it with the analog stick turning and occasional viewpoint resets. Of course, that is just one of a ton of accessibility options to change and tweak and try and get the right and most comfortable experience for you. There's a few presets that feel like they will cover most bases for most people, and there's some great inclusions here alongside that. In particular, you've got eye tracking in the headset, which allows for some auto-aim for where you're looking. This will subtly bend your arrow flight in a way that makes you feel like you're a bow expert, even if your aim was maybe not as true as you think it was. As you go through the narrative's twists and turns, it can sometimes feel a little bit odd that you're always returning to a hub world with characters between missions, even when there's a seeming sudden time pressure that's coming up against you. This does help to flesh out Rias' character beyond his regular mutterings while climbing, and it also means that there's regular breakpoints in the roughly 7-ish hour adventure for players to stop and perhaps take a rest. You can also use regular bonfire save spots to head back to the outpost if you want to exit a mission before its end. Horizon Call of the Mountain is an ideal showcase for what PlayStation VR 2 can do. With stunning PS5-powered vistas and a great blend of intuitive climbing and combat, this is a must-play game for anyone that is picking up this next-generation headset. That's all that we've got for this video review of Horizon Call of the Mountain, but make sure to check out the rest of our PlayStation VR 2 coverage that we've got up on YouTube and over on the sixthaxis.com. Before you go, please do like, subscribe, do the usual YouTube things, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!